This is TWiT.
So we thought we would compare some cloud services today.
Yes.
Everybody's in the cloud. And I thought this was a good time, too, because, you know, we've been trying out iOS 11 and showing that off. And part of iOS 11 is the new Files app that lets you access
Supports the cloud, yeah.
not just iCloud.
We should probably explain what we mean by cloud before we go too much farther.
Yes, we should.
It's not just a little puffy thing.
No, clouds aren't just puffy things
Actually,
anymore.
goes back to the days when engineers would illustrate circuits. And, you know, you'd have certain symbols for different, you know, transistor and a resistor and so forth. And if they were drawing a network, they'd have servers and they'd have computers. But then they had this problem because then there's the internet. There's out there. And so they always represented it out there because it's an unknown. It's a black box with a puffy little cloud. So that's why we call it the cloud. It's whatever is not in your premise. You know, it's outside your premise. And truth is, it's really the same thing that's in your premise. You know, the network that you're going to, whether you're going to OneDrive or Google or Facebook or Amazon, is really just a bunch of computers connected by, you know, usually Ethernet. It's just that they have a connection to the internet, you have a connection to the internet, and you get together over this cloud. So when we talk about cloud, we're talking about using storage that isn't on your premises, that's somewhere out there over the internet.
Is it okay if I still like to imagine that my photos and files and stuff are just up there somewhere?
Yeah, except that it's kind of important if to understand that it isn't really, that it's just on somebody else's computer.
Right.
Now, they're very fancy computers and they're very fancy network centers that are air conditioned and they have backup power. They're probably more reliable than our homes and offices, but it's the same kind of thing. And that means that sometimes the people who work there can look at what's on those computers. It means law enforcement can often subpoena what's on those computers. In fact, in the past, they've even been known to go into these network operations centers and take all the computers and bring them back to the forensics lab and analyze them all. So it's important to, if you think it's just a cloud, then it may be the properties of that cloud are kind of amorphous, but it's not. The cloud's just really where how we're connecting. It's really on just a computer system in somebody else's office.
Right. It's good to know who that somebody else is.
Very important. And what their policies are and whether they have access or if they use encryption at all. And if they use encryption, if they know the key or you know the key and things like that. These are really important if you want to protect your privacy and your security. For instance, we talk about iCloud. That's Apple's. Now, remember, iCloud is just some servers in North Carolina. It's in a big network operations center, and they're computers with hard drives and processors, very much like your computer. They're not Macs. Actually, interestingly, Apple runs on Windows. They use Azure for their cloud,
really,
which is a Microsoft service. Shh, doesn't matter. That's one of the best things about the cloud is you don't have to think about what file format, what disk format, what kind of computer. None of that's important. It's all accessible to you over a standard protocol, over an internet protocol. But, you know, Apple, in this case, encrypts the data as it's going to the cloud. It uses HTTPS. You want to make sure of that so that no bystander can just snoop on what you're sending to the cloud. And then they encrypt it on the hard drive with strong encryption. But, and this is pretty common with cloud providers, it's also true of Dropbox and Microsoft's OneDrive and Amazon, they hold the encryption key. And that means if you had a rogue employee, I trust Apple and they keep those keys pretty close to the chest, but if you had a rogue employee who had access to the key, he or she could see your stuff, that law enforcement would almost certainly be able to get your stuff with a proper subpoena or warrant. And so sometimes people, that's sometimes for people not enough. They want something Steve Gibson calls trust no one, which means only you have the key that can unlock your data. And there are very few trust no one cloud providers. So it's important to think about what you're putting on the cloud. And really, unless you're using a trust no one provider and you really know what you're doing, not assume that stuff is private. And of course, that's the trouble that a few Hollywood stars got into a few years ago. They used iCloud to back up the contents of their phone, which happened to have embarrassing pictures of themselves, and these pictures leaked out because somebody hacked Apple's iCloud. That's a perfect example. Don't put anything on the cloud you wouldn't want grandma to see.
Right. I mean, that's a good discussion about what the cloud is and what stuff is. We're talking about this being stuff, all of our stuff. When you think about your stuff in your house, you're protected. You're protected against, it belongs in your house. But once it's in the cloud, all this stuff is not the same. Like you're saying, it's not protected necessarily by, search and seizure rules and all that.
Right. So having said that, somebody was asking in the chat room at the beginning of the show, do you recommend iOS 11 if you have an iPad Pro? I wouldn't do it if you absolutely have to have a reliable iPad Pro, but we're both using iOS 11 now.
We are.
Which is a beta. It's in the second beta. The second one came out this week. And I found it's very reliable.
Yeah.
I love it. And one of the features, and we're going to show you, is this new file browser. And you see, not only does it browse your local files, but look at all the cloud providers. There's Google Drive.
We can't see because of your head. Oh,
there's my big fat head. There's, what is DS Cloud? Oh, this is my personal cloud.
Is that your Trust No One cloud?
Yeah. Pardon me?
Ooh, let's look at it.
Disk Station, thank you. You want to look at it?
No.
Okay. So Disk Station is a Synology network attached storage, a big Synology, that's the company, drive in my wine cellar.
Oh.
Because it's cool. And so that is a kind of trust no one, right? I mean, as long as you know that the Disk Station software is secure and that you're transporting data to it secure, I can store stuff there that no one has access to. Law enforcement would have to come to me with the warrant. And that's good. The problem with iCloud and all these is, thanks to the Patriot Act, law enforcement can go to Apple with a warrant, and Apple can't tell you. So, your data could be seized by law enforcement without your knowledge. At least this way, I'd know. Here's OneDrive. That's the Microsoft cloud. Here's the stuff on my iPad. Here's Apple's cloud. Here's Dropbox. So right there, you see, and these are all things I have a account with, so I've turned them on.
You also have the app, presumably, on your iPad, because I know that if you don't have, you won't see all those if you don't have the OneDrive app. Right. You won't see it if you don't. You'll only see iCloud until you download the Drive app.
Here's another way to do a local cloud. This is the OS X server, which is inexpensive. I can't remember. I think it's $30 in the App Store. If you have a Macintosh, you can download this in the Apple App Store, install it, and run it, and use your Macintosh at home as the cloud. Now, you'll have to do some configuration with your router. This is probably like the Synology for more sophisticated people. But these are two ways built right in. I have the DS Cloud software on my iPad. That's why it shows up there. So that's not built in, but the OS X server is, that you can access your stuff and keep it private. What do you have in your? I'm just curious. What do you have in your file browser, Megan Morrone?
I have the same. I don't have a DS. If you show my screen, Kevin, you can see what I have. iCloud, my iPad. I turned on OS X server because I thought, why not? But then when I tap it, it just does.
That's because you're not running OS X server. Yeah. So you need to set that up and run it at home. So you might as well turn that off because it's just annoying because there's nothing there.
Right. And I can also move it down if I want to get out of there.
Google Drive is, of course, everybody's got, well, most people have Google Drive.
And I have OneDrive, and then I have Dropbox, but I haven't signed into that yet. But I just downloaded the app, so that's what it looks like. And then you turn it on, and it'll probably ask me to sign in. Oh, no, I guess I already did sign in. Yeah. So, that's what I have. I wanted to show you one thing real quick. Last week, I was complaining about this Studio Neat canopy and that I couldn't get to the dock without kind of sticking my finger in there. Many of you reminded me of the keyboard shortcut to get the dock, which works on OS X, and that is Option Command D.
This is bothering me, so I'm just going to do this a little bit here so we don't have the angle.
Is that good? Yeah, so Option Command D to get that. So
but that's hard to remember. Option Command D pops up the dock.
Yeah.
Or hides it.
Or Option Command D. Goodbye. Yeah. Those are the ones that I have. Should we talk a little bit about the price? Because everybody has a little bit of free space for you, but once you get into more than that, it's going to cost some money.
Right.
All of this. And iOS just constantly nags you to upgrade.
Unfortunately, you don't have a choice about that, I don't think. I guess you could now that's an interesting question. If you completely disabled iCloud, which I don't recommend, would it get rid of all the nags? The reason I don't recommend it is because even with only 5 gigabytes, which is the free storage, at least you have a backup. You can copy files there. And most of the Apple apps like Pages and Keynote, the iWork apps, will by default store on the cloud. So I leave iCloud on. It's not. Here's another reason to use the cloud. So we've kind of been talking about backup, storing your photos and things like that there. Another reason to use it, though, is many applications will use it as file storage. And the reason you might want to do that, what if you're using Pages on your iPad and then you go home and you have a Mac, you could open Pages there and it would be able to see those documents. You could work on those documents from a variety of places. Now, that's only good if you're all Apple. Actually, that's not strictly true because you have iCloud access. You just don't have Pages. You have iCloud access on Windows. You could probably open the Pages document with Word or something like that. But that if you are a Windows user on your desktop, OneDrive will do much the same thing. That's Microsoft's solution. OneDrive also gives you a certain amount for free.
5 gigs. Same
but
as Apple.
Many people have a lot more because you'll get, as with Google Drive, if you buy a Chromebook, you get 100 gigs of free storage with a Chromebook. If you buy some Windows machines, you'll get free storage off 100 gigs. In some cases, even more. I think I have a terabyte.
With Office 365 subscription, you get a terabyte.
Yeah. Now, they used to say it's unlimited. A terabyte is unlimited. It would be, the one negative of the cloud is you have to use your internet bandwidth to put it up there. And most people have much slower upstream bandwidth than they do downstream. You know, when you buy your internet, it usually says something like 20 megabits. Your mileage may vary in most cases, as fast as. But what you really want is the dual number, 20/5, and you can find that. The second number is your upload speed, and that's what is the limit with cloud storage. And it's one of the reasons a terabyte is virtually infinite. You're not going to store gigabytes of data up on the cloud because it's just too slow to do that, unless you're lucky enough to be working here where we have what's called a symmetric connection, a fast 10 gigabit symmetric. So it's 10 gigabits up and 10 gigabits down. Then cloud makes a lot more sense. That's why cloud really started, the whole idea of cloud storage really started in businesses that had a lot of upstream bandwidth. So remember, at home, your downstream bandwidth is going to be somewhat of a constraint on what you can do.
And
your upstream, I should say.
Right. I also think that be careful before you load all of your stuff in one cloud. Because I feel like these are the prices that they are now, but there's no telling they're not going to change in the future. And I don't think that there's some sort of conspiracy theory, but I think it is very likely that these companies are saying, yes, it's free, it's unlimited, and then I've put 10 years of photos on there, and then when they say, we're going to start charging, am I really going to move those 10 years of photos somewhere else, or am I just going to say, okay, $15 a month, not a big deal, I'm going to do it.
Right.
So.
Well, that's a good point. Amazon, for instance, if you're a Prime member right now, offers unlimited free photo storage, much like Google does. But who knows if that price will stay free. In fact, I didn't know how I did this, but I was checking my Amazon Drive the other day, and I had 100 gigabytes there, and they wanted money. They wanted me to pay that money, and I actually just started deleting stuff because I didn't.
You didn't want to pay $12.
Well, I had turned on automatic uploading on a desktop, I guess.
I would like someone to do a study to see how many photos of just like the ground there are, like up in those cloud photo storage, where you just like accidentally took a picture or an accidental screenshot, just the things that up in the cloud that nobody intends to save, but it's just so easy. We're doing automatic camera upload. I'm sure.
I bet there's a lot of stuff.
So it's 5 gigs free for OneDrive and iCloud. Google Drive gives you 15 gigabytes free, but that also includes your Gmail if you're using Gmail.
And that fools people because Gmail can be the bulk of that.
And Dropbox only gives you 2 gigs free. So 1 terabyte is $10 a month. Pretty much for everybody, 1 terabyte is $10 a month. Google Drive, 1 terabyte is $10 a month. iCloud is $10 a month. But everybody but iCloud will give you a discount on a year. So for most of these services, aside from iCloud, it's $100 for a year. For iCloud, it's still $9.99 a month, whether you subscribe for a year or not. So just, minor, they're all about the same, but so there are other features that I think you should consider besides the cost.
Yeah.
Now, what do you think about privacy when you're comparing all these different sites?
I'm just logging in real quickly because I forgot one other cloud service that I do use on all my other computers and I hadn't installed yet on here, which is Box. I like Box. Box is kind of a competitor to Dropbox. It's very similar to Dropbox. It has somewhat of the same capabilities, and it will show up in the file manager. If you, that was a good example of, since I hadn't installed it, it didn't show up. Now that I've installed it, it should be in there.
Why do you like Box?
The reason, yeah, there it is. The reason I started using Box is because it was used on, I think it was one of my Linux distributions. So one of the things that will affect your decision is some apps will use a cloud service as backup or storage. That's why you might want to use Amazon Prime storage for your photos, for instance. And there are, until recently, iCloud was a little broken for app storage. So people tended to use Dropbox. Some used Box. So I have a lot of apps that store their data, for instance, on Dropbox, which really encourages you to have a Dropbox account. Although, again, 5 gigabytes is a lot of free storage. I think that's why I have Box. I think is because one of my apps used it, but it's very similar. I don't know if there's any significantly different features. What is also important is there are some trust no one services that may or may not have iPad apps, but there are other cloud services. I'm going to mention one right now called Tresorit. It's out of. Let me just see if there's an app for it. Yeah, there is. So this is out of Tresorit. It's from the German word Tresor, which means treasure. Oh. It sounds like I'm kidding. But this is trust no one. So in this case, your data is stored on their servers, but they don't have access to it. It's also in Switzerland, and they say, well, the privacy laws are better here. The only, they use standard encryption, which I think is good. The only thing that worried me is they say patented encryption, and that worried me that they might be using their own proprietary stuff. But I see here they're using RSA and AES. That's a good sign. The RSA looks like that's used for transport from yours to the other. AES would be for their local storage. That's a good sign. So this has some limitations when the cloud service doesn't have the key. There's some things that they can't do as a convenience to you. But if privacy is key, there are services like SpiderOak and Tresorit, or I like to say Tresorit, but Tresorit, that do have what's true trust no one encryption.
What happens if you forget your password?
You're out of luck. Don't.
Got it.
But that's what you want, by the way. And that's one way to test if they have your key. If you forget your password and you can ask them, oh, I forgot my password. Could you give me a new one? Or could you tell me what it is? That's a bad sign. There are a couple of things that will let you know that they have the key. But generally, you could just look at their terms of service and you'll be able to tell that.
So I think like most average people, I mostly use cloud services for photos.
Right.
And it's a good idea to use more than one, because just in case one fails you. So, and I think that Loquacious in the chat room was saying, I love Dropbox. I just wish they had a better pricing. And it's true, Dropbox will, they'll do kind of not shady things, but things I don't like, where like, get someone to sign up and you'll get more free service. I'm not a big fan of trying to, encourage your friends, use your friends as leverage to get free stuff. It's just I'm not a fan of that. And I think a lot of the reason I am fond of Dropbox, and maybe I don't want to speak for you, Loquacious, but it was the first one, right? Like it was the first service that was easy to share your files. I remember like back in the day, you would say, I have this big file, like don't email it, like just use Dropbox. And so I think
that's really true.
There's a lot of there's just a lot of, gosh, you were the first one there. But then at the same time, it's expensive. And they've had some issues with security. I know there was some ransomware, like in my last job, there was an entire, like someone had clicked on a phishing scam, and then all of our Dropbox files in this project that I was working on.
Oh, that's bad.
Yeah. And
that's an example of really why, you got to be careful with cloud storage.
Mm-hmm. But and they don't do anything. Like I have all my photos on Google Photos and Prime Photos and iCloud, and I get advantages with that. Like Google Photos, we've talked about it a million times, but they'll put slideshows together for you. They'll make GIFs out of, many of the photos you took. They'll give you your memories. And
I think that's so worth it.
Yeah, and same with obviously iCloud, having your photos all there are just easy if if you use iPads and iPhones and Macs. They're just all there, and you can easily make photo books. And Prime Photos is the same way. Like now I can play all my Prime Photos on my Echo Show, which I just got. So, it's nice to have this screen in my kitchen that I just say, I'd say play my photos, and then all of my photos from a certain day or a certain trip will appear. So they're giving all these extras. So it's free. Plus, it's a little bit of extra fun stuff. But I'm talking about average people like you, people who do want to run their own home server, who have these giant files, people like John, who has 10 million episodes of Doctor Who that he wants to store somewhere. Everyone has different needs.
Well, and that's why I would suggest...
That was John with his episodes. Kevin thought we should see John in his
That's scary.
episodes of Doctor Who floating
I thought there was
around
somebody
the cloud.
coming for us. If you're not watching video, don't worry about it. That's why what I would suggest is that you be aware of the implications of using various cloud storages and continue to use Dropbox, continue to use iCloud, especially the free tiers, but understand that they're not completely private and secure. And then maybe, now Tresorit is expensive, but maybe if there's some stuff you really, don't, those pictures from the party last weekend, you really don't want to leak out to anybody, you use a service like Tresorit, or perhaps set up your own cloud storage. It's expensive, but not, impossibly so to have a cloud server at home. It's more of a technical issue to have your own cloud server. So it's a good idea, though, to understand the different levels of security and then use it appropriately. Put the data in the right place. Put data you're not too worried about on places like iCloud and Dropbox. It really is important, if you're taking embarrassing pictures on your iPhone, that you don't put those on iCloud.
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, I wouldn't put them on Google, and I wouldn't put them on Amazon Prime storage. Those you want to keep somewhere else. Unfortunately, it's not always easy to say, well, these pictures are okay. So this is something you've got to think about a little bit. Mm-hmm. And they make it complicated, not only by having free tiers and changing prices, and it's not easy to go, and there are comparison tables, but if you look at them, it's pretty complicated to figure out, and that's how they want it. Frankly, they want you to just go, I'm just going to use iCloud, it's easier. I'm just going to use Dropbox, it's easier. And I use them all. I have Box, I have Dropbox, I have iCloud, I have OneDrive, I have Amazon, I have Google. I use them all.
I think the one thing that's really changed since maybe we did an episode like this a year ago or 2 years ago, we would have a lot more services like Tresorit that people had never heard of, that we would say like, hey, try this cloud service, try that cloud service. But it really is now down to the big guys, to those companies that are competing on all ends, Amazon, Google, Apple. Dropbox is fighting for its life there among all of those services. And, some part of me feels bad, like, oh yeah, I want the independent services. But when you're talking about trusting a company with all of that information, you want them to stick around for a while. You want to know that they're going to be around. And that's not saying that though any of these services will be around forever. And they do have the right to, if they change hands, to give all of our content to someone else. So that is something to think about too when you're talking about, those pictures you took last Saturday, or your important documents, whatever you might have, if your work stuff, all that stuff. It's good to keep that in mind.
Yeah, it's absolutely. This is why we're talking about it. And I have to say that this new file browser, which will be available for everybody in the fall, is going to be a really look. I just added Tresorit to. So as soon as you install the app, it'll show up in the file browser. I think this means we're going to see a lot more usage on the iPad. Mm-hmm. This was kind of always a problem with the iPad. Was where are my files and how can I preserve them? Now you have a choice. You don't have to use iCloud. You have other choices. And so now you've got to do a little bit of homework. If you don't want to do homework, iCloud's a great choice. Just remember, don't put anything on iCloud that you don't want to be public because it could conceivably become public. Remember that it is going to cost you. I do the $1.99 a month tier. What is that? I think that's 10 gigabytes. Maybe it's 100 gigabytes. It's enough so that I think it's 100 gigabytes for $2 a month. That's a good price. And that's enough for me to back up my phone and my iPad and not have to worry about it and still have enough left over for things like iWork. So $2 a month. Remember, it's not fully secure. It just works with Apple stuff. I think that's a good choice.
Yeah, 50 gigabytes for 99 cents a month.
50 gigabytes for 99
so
cents
it's
a month.
Probably 100. I don't know how much.
Yeah, I think I get 100 for $2 a month. 50 is good too.
Yeah.
You start with the low tier because, and then when you fill it up, then they'll say, but it is a good idea to pay attention to what you're backing up to it, because you may say, well, I don't need to back up that old iPad, or you may decide to save money over backing up some devices. It's most important, I think, that you back up your phone. That's where all the stuff is that you're going to, especially pictures that you're going to want.
Yeah. And then spend, before you gauge how much it's worth to you. Like if I spend an hour, figuring out what I'm backing up, deleting a bunch of stuff I no longer need, that might be worth it to you rather than going up to the next tier.